Hello and welcome to the most hated deck of all time, Stasis. So a huge shout out to Nicholas Dijon for helping me to make this deck tech. This is his actual deck. As you can see, it's super shiny and nice, and he's put a ton of time into it. So big thank you. Our main game plan is to play a kind of controlling game and wait for a key moment where we can catch our opponent with a stasis and just completely lock them out of the game. Our deck is built to abuse this card. We can either untap our Forsaken Cities every upkeep, which is not our untap step, it's our upkeep, so that we can keep it going forever, but we also have tons of other cards to abuse Stasis with as well. We have bounce spells to bounce it at the end of our opponent's turn, so that we can then untap and just play it again with a fully untapped board. We can also use them to bounce our opponent's annoying threats and permanents. But the main way we can abuse this is with all of these free spells. Normally, returning islands to our hand would be a disadvantage, but for our deck, when they're tapped down with a stasis and they won't untap, we can use it as a great way to return them and play them untapped. We can also discard them to foil, as all of these cards synergize super well. We have extra card draw in Howling Mine and Impulse because we really do need to find a stasis, and we can also use it to find our win condition. So our win condition is Black Vise. Obviously it's boosted by Howling Mine, but by no means we do not need a Howling Mine to kill our opponent with this deck. And a quick note is that some decks do have natural defense against this, because decks with discard outlets, they can just discard their hand, so it's really hard to kill them with a Black Vise. And creatures with vigilance, they obviously don't tap under a stasis, so they can be annoying as well sometimes. For removal, we have Powder Keg, which is absolutely brilliant card, and we also have Ensnare. Tapping stuff down when a stasis is in play is basically the same as stopping it, so we can play that if we want, but not all decks do. For extra counters, we don't actually play Counter Spell, we play Arcane Denial, because as I mentioned before, we're really trying to find our stasis, and we also don't really care if our opponent draws more cards when one's in play. For lands, our mana base is super simple, just islands and Forsaken Cities. We only want blue mana, so nothing else needed here. So some decks, they do splash green for Root Maze. You can play it off Forsaken City, that actually adds any colour. Not all decks do. In the sideboard, we have all the usual suspects: anti-red hate, anti-artifact hate, and creature ability hate in Null Rod and Cursed Totem, Morphling as an alternative win condition, and Stifle versus combo. We are firmly a prison deck, so we're kind of like a control deck that feels a bit combo-ish. We're looking to control the game until we can just hit our opponent out of nowhere with a stasis and lock them out. The strengths of this deck are that it's very cheap to build, it has a simple mana base, and it has a strong game plan in that it naturally attacks what decks are doing anyway, i.e. tapping their mana, tapping their stuff. The downsides are that some people will hate you. Red decks, burn decks, very fast aggro decks, decks that have hand disruption are all going to be a problem, and also decks that have discard enablers to discard their own hand are going to be very difficult to kill. We also do rely on a stasis in time to lock our opponent out. And here's another picture of Nick's list, but do check out TC Decks. There's tons of lists on there. Thank you for watching, please subscribe.